kind of inwardly you were hoping for this and dreaming about it, but you never actually believed it was really going to happen. There might be a chance, but it probably wouldn't happen. So when it did happen, it was incredible.
Now, a number of your early songs that you recorded with the Triumphs, such as Hey Judy, Billy and Sue, and Mama, were written by a Houston songwriter named Mark Charan. So what attracted you to his songwriting?
Yeah, Mark Sharon was the guy's name. He was a friend of mine from Lake Jackson, Texas. He was he was just a buddy of mine, and he was a songwriter. And just about anything he would write, I would record, and I cut a lot of his stuff on my very earliest first recordings. And actually, he played in the band with us, the Triumphs. He played with us for a couple of years, and he was just a good buddy, my best friend at the time. And he actually was the guy that kind of suggested "I'm So Lonesome" to me. We had been to see Your Cheating Heart, which was the life story of Hank Williams.
Yeah, the Hank Williams movie.
We were walking out of this, I guess it was George Hamilton the fourth, George Hamilton, not the fourth, George Hamilton who played Hank, and Hank Jr. sang the soundtrack, and we were coming out of the movie, and Mark said, man, that "I'm So Lonesome" thing, that sounds like something you could really do. We ought to do that with the band. So we did. We started doing it at our dances, and it kind of developed into the version that I recorded, and just everything happened for the good on that one.
Now, when doing some research on the internet, I found that it was speculated that Mark wrote "Hey Judy" about your sister, happened to be by the name of Judy, and I know that he lived with you for a period of time. So,
yeah.
Do you think that song was inspired by her? Is that sort of just a legend, and he picked the name out, and it's gone?
No, he actually did. He actually did write it right there for my sister, and he had a huge crush on her, which he never. I don't think. He ever, they ever really acted on it. She was a young girl. She was, 9 or 10 years younger than us. So, but she was a very, sweet little thing, and a beautiful girl. And he wrote that for her, and that story is absolutely true.
and yeah, I wondered about that, because sometimes, things, people, names just sort of just you pick the name and it goes, it just happens to be in the song from someone and then these stories develop over the years. So I was just curious about that, whether or not. So thank you for clearing that up. It sounds like it could have just been made up, but no, it's true. And also, Billy and Sue, I think, is a really unique song. And when I was going back, because it seemed to me that this was probably the case, because you recorded that around 1966, and it's clearly quite a... Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. What happened was I recorded the song, first of all, in '64. He wrote it, and obviously it was about the Vietnam conflict, and just this kind of just a simple song about that. And I had it out in '64, actually on Warner Brothers, through the guy I was signed to at that time. And after I had "I'm So Lonesome" and "Mama" in '66, well, Wesley Rose, Mr. Rose, bought some of my masters. I didn't know Mr. Rose until later, but he bought some of my masters, and he released Billy and Sue on the Hickory label, and it became it sold quite a few records.
Well, you touched on this, that it was at the time of the Vietnam War, but I think that is one of the first songs that really touched on the Vietnam War as a song subject matter, at least sort of tangentially, And
yeah, I think so. It wasn't a protest song. It was just it probably was the first song of its kind.
So let's skip ahead a little bit, and you eventually, in the late '60s, I believe it was, decided to move to Memphis to record, and I believe it was there in Memphis that you first met your longtime producer, Chips Moman. Is that correct?
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's absolutely. I moved to Memphis in '67. Mark James, the songwriter that wrote "Hooked on a Feeling," "The Eyes of a New York Woman," and "Suspicious Minds" eventually for Elvis, he called me in '67 and said, "B, you ought to come up here to Memphis, because these guys are cutting a lot of hit records and a lot of great songwriters up here, a lot of material." So I moved up in '67, and I began to work with the American Studio Group, and Chips Moman, who was their producer and the engineer, and actually was a guitar player himself, who played on quite a few hit records. And we we cut The Eyes of a New York Woman and cut Hooked on a Feeling, and those two songs were very instrumental in getting me on to getting the chance to do Raindrops.
Well, that perfectly, that leads us right up into 1969, and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, which was #1 on the pop charts. But that was recorded for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid movie, for those that might not remember that far back. But so I was wondering, how did you come to record that song for the movie? I know that Dionne Warwick was involved in that.
Yeah, she was. And of course, it was a thrill to hear Raindrops for Spider-Man 2, and the Raindrops, of course, was written. The lyrics were written by Hal David, and the music composed by Burt Bacharach, originally for the soundtrack of Butch Cassidy, as you said, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And just something about Raindrops had such a spiritual and realistic truth to it that as long as we're free, the raindrops can fall on us. As long as we're free, we're okay. Nothing's worrying us. So there's something about it that rang true with almost everyone, young people and older people alike. So it was just a great song. But Dionne did have a hand in that. I had a couple of gold records come into the Scepter offices on the New York Woman and Hooked on a Feeling, and she took the records into Burt's office. Burt had an office there because they also had a label. Burt Bacharach and Hal David had the Wand record label. It was Scepter Wand. And she took them in and said, "Hey, Burt, do you see these things? These are BJs, and you better write him something." So I was kind of in the back of his mind when they wrote the bicycle scene, the song for the bicycle scene, and I got the chance to do it, and I'm eternally grateful and honored and luckiest guy in the world to get that song. It's been such an honor and a privilege to have that song to sing all these years, and of course won the Academy Award, and just was a great song. I mean, gosh, all the unbelievably great songs that Burt Bacharach and Hal David wrote. Raindrops was just one of them, because it's almost everything they wrote was a masterpiece.
It's definitely become a classic, but I was interested in finding out whether you were concerned at whether it might be successful or not, because it has a very unique melody and the timing of the song is very different, and there's that one note there where you almost think maybe that might not be the right note if you were thinking, you know what I mean there, right in the beginning. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing we got back then when we put it out on record, and believe me. Now, in the studio, when we cut that song, I knew, that you always hope that what you're recording is going to be successful, but I just knew deep down in my soul and my heart that was going to be a successful song. I mean, there was Burt Bacharach directing the orchestra, and Hal David wrote a great movie, Butch Cassidy and Paul Newman, and blah, 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 and I knew it was going to be a smash. But right at first, when it came out, there was a real resistance to it, and actually one station from Chicago called us, the #1 station in Chicago, and said, "Hey, we said that Florence Greenberg, the owner of the label, told me about it, and said they'd call and said we can't play the record." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, BJ is singing the wrong note, the wrong notes." And then she said, "Well, excuse me, but if it was the wrong note, don't you think Burt Bacharach would have noticed that?" And so it wasn't the wrong note; it was exactly how he wrote it and exactly how he wanted me to phrase it, and we took a lot of time getting that phrasing exact, because that's exactly how he wrote it, and I think without that phrasing, it wouldn't have been the hit that it was.
No, the phrasing certainly works well with the imagery. Just a fabulous
and
song.
all those notes are right. I don't think Burt Bacharach would have overlooked a wrong note.
No, probably not. But I was always curious about that, because it is a different sounding song.
It's different, isn't it? Yeah, and of course, after that, I recorded "Everybody's Out of Town," which is probably one of the most unique songs of all time. There was never a song before or after like "Everybody's Out of Town." So they were really, Burt and Hal were very adventurous, and they were pushing the envelope when they got the chance, and they were very unique in the style and the melodies and the compositions that they would write. So they were